Hey guys, tonight we are going out to dinner. Not to your local pizza place, or that fancy spot you save for anniversaries. No, tonight we are travelling back in time 1,000 years to discover the world's very first restaurants with menus in Song Dynasty China. The city is Kaifeng, the year is roughly 1100, and you're about to experience a level of culinary choice that would have made a contemporary European king's head spin. Picture it, a metropolis so vibrant, so crowded, and so obsessed with food that it literally invented a new way of eating. Of course, given the complete lack of food safety standards, traveller's insurance, or even a language you understand, you probably won't survive this meal without a slight bit of intestinal distress. It's all part of the authentic experience. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, as you settle into your cozy bed or favourite armchair and we get ready to dive into tonight's trip into medieval times, I invite you to leave a comment sharing where in the world you're tuning in from and what time of day it is for you. It's always warming to know how vast our community of nocturnal historians reaches. The first thing you notice isn't a sight, but a feeling. It's the slow, rhythmic rocking of the barge, a gentle sway that has been your companion for days, as you've drifted down a tributary toward the legendary Grand Canal. For a while, the landscape was nothing but sleepy villages and endless fields of millet and wheat under a hazy, northern sky. But now, the traffic on the water is becoming dense. Long, slender grain boats, piled high with tribute from the south, glide past you. Smaller skiffs, rowed by singing fishermen, dart between them. The air itself feels different thicker, carrying the distant hum of 1,000,000 human lives. And then you see it. On the horizon, it doesn't look like a city so much as a geological feature. A vast, dark line of immense earthen walls, punctuated by the occasional watchtower. This is the outer wall of Kaifeng, the capital of the Northern Song Empire, and arguably the largest and most prosperous city on the planet. Forget medieval London or Paris, which were little more than overgrown towns at this point. Kaifeng is a true beast of a city, a sprawling testament to wealth and power. Historians still debate the exact population figures, with estimates ranging wildly from over 500,000 to well over 1,000,000 souls packed inside its 3 concentric rings of walls. Either way, it makes your hometown look like a quiet cul-de-sac. As your boat is expertly guided into one of the city's many water gates, the gentle hum you heard from afar explodes into a symphony of controlled chaos. You step off the barge onto a stone quay, and the ground feels strangely still after so long on the water. The scale of the place is breathtaking. You have to crane your neck back to see the top of the gatehouse towering above you. Carved wooden eaves curl towards the sky, decorated with intricate patterns. Stern-looking soldiers in laminated leather armour stand guard, their halberds glinting, but they seem more interested in watching the flow of commerce than in bothering a disoriented traveller like you. You follow the crush of people moving from the docks into the city proper. You are now officially inside the walls, and the experience is an immediate assault on the senses. The main thoroughfare is a wide, packed earth street, meticulously maintained and astonishingly clean for a city of this size. Both sides are lined with 2- and 3-story wooden buildings, their dark timbers framing shops open to the street. Banners with bold calligraphic characters hang from every storefront, fluttering in the breeze. And the people, there are so many people. You see stoic merchants with foreign faces, their heavy cloaks suggesting they've travelled the Silk Road from Persia or beyond. You see scholar officials in crisp, flowing robes and distinctive black hats, looking terribly important as they are carried through the crowd in sedan chairs by sweating porters. Buddhist monks in saffron and grey robes walk with quiet purpose, their heads shaved. Street vendors, balancing loaded poles across their shoulders, shout their wares in a sharp, melodic dialect of Chinese that makes your peasant-level Mandarin completely useless. It's like trying to navigate Times Square on New Year's Eve, but instead of digital billboards, you have beautifully painted signs you can't read, and instead of GPS, you have, well, nothing. Good luck finding the nearest restroom. Over the din of voices and the rumble of heavy ox carts, you can hear the faint sound of music, the plucking of a pipa, a pear-shaped lute from a second-story window somewhere nearby. A slight breeze does little to cut the humidity, but it does carry the smell of the river, the dusty scent of the packed earth streets, and the overwhelming, tantalizing aroma of 1,000 different things being cooked at once. Something fatty and savory here, something sweet and spicy there. That is the true guiding principle of this city, you realize. Above all else, Kaifeng is a city that lives to eat. One of the more advanced, and perhaps surprising features you notice, are the tall, thin watchtowers standing at regular intervals. These aren't for military defence. They are fire towers, part of a sophisticated, professionalised firefighting brigade. In a city built almost entirely of wood and bamboo, a stray spark could be catastrophic. These towers are a silent, reassuring testament to the incredible level of civic planning at work here. This isn't just a big city, it's a managed one. And somewhere within this maze of perfectly managed, endlessly fascinating urban life is a hot meal with your name on it. If you can just figure out which of those 1,000 hanging signs promises dinner, you decide the only logical way to navigate this magnificent, bewildering place is to follow your nose. So you turn off the main thoroughfare and take a smaller, narrower street that seems to be the source of the most enticing smells. The noise level changes instantly. The broad rumble of the Grand Avenue is replaced by a more intimate cacophony. The sharp clatter of a cleaver on a wooden block, the hiss of oil in a hot wok, the cheerful, insistent cries of vendors, and the low burble of 100 simmering pots. This street, you realise, is a living, breathing kitchen. There's barely room to walk, as the storefronts on either side have spilled out into the lane, setting up tables, stoves, and massive steaming baskets right on the packed earth. The air is a tapestry woven from 1,000 fragrant threads. First, you pick out the warm, clean, comforting scent of yeast. It's coming from a vendor with enormous bamboo baskets, stacked 6 high, each one venting clouds of steam. He lifts a lid, revealing dozens of perfectly white, fluffy steamed buns, or mantou. Just next to him, a completely different aroma dominates, the smoky, gamey scent of lamb, roasting on long skewers over a glowing bed of coals. A man with a deeply tanned, weathered face is fanning the embers with a palm leaf, the fat from the meat dripping and sizzling, sending up plumes of smoke spiced with cumin and pepper. The scent is sharp, foreign, and a direct olfactory echo of the far-off deserts these spices came from. It's a smell that tells a story of trade, of the Silk Road terminating not in a warehouse, but right here on a skewer. You take a few more steps, carefully sidestepping a puddle of something you'd rather not identify, and a new scent wave hits you. This one is rich, funky, and profoundly savoury. It's a deep, earthy smell that's both compelling and slightly alarming. You see a bubbling cauldron of dark, fragrant liquid, nascent hot pot, perhaps, and a woman ladling it into small bowls for a queue of eager customers. Historians, reading the detailed accounts from this period, are often stunned by the sheer variety of sauces and broths available. We know, for instance, of a slurry of household odds and ends, which sounds less like a gourmet delicacy and more like what happens when you clean out the fridge. Still, people loved it. This chaos of food is a direct result of Song China's economic boom. A new, powerful merchant class had emerged, alongside the traditional scholar officials. These people had money, busy schedules, and a taste for novelty. Critically, the old Tang Dynasty era curfews, which forced everyone indoors at night, had been abolished. Now, the city's markets could throb with life well after dark, illuminated by lanterns and the glow of countless cooking fires. This freedom turned Kaifeng into a 24/7 food court. As you wander, you're almost knocked over by a boy carrying a tray of what look like glazed, deep-fried pastries. The smell is overpoweringly sweet, a mix of honey and sesame. Then it's immediately replaced by the sour tang of pickled vegetables from a massive earthenware jar a shopkeeper is currently unsealing. Your brain, which is used to a world where a restaurant serves one type of cuisine, is short-circuiting. Italian, Mexican, Chinese. Here, the categories seem to be things that are steamed, things that are fried, and things currently on fire. A fringe but fascinating historical tidbit is that Song-era cities were some of the first places in the world to deal with industrial-level air pollution, thanks to their pioneering and widespread use of coal for fuel. That slight, acrid, sulphurous tang you can taste at the back of your throat, that's not just wood smoke, it's the smell of progress, 12th century style. It's all a bit overwhelming. You see food everywhere, but it's all fast food, street food, meant to be eaten on the go. You see a burly dock worker, stripped to the waist, happily slurping down a bowl of noodles while standing up. You see an elegantly dressed woman, her face powdered white, delicately nibbling on a candied crab apple she bought from a passing vendor. This whole city runs on snacks. But you are a traveller. You are weary. You don't want to eat standing up in an alley that smells simultaneously of roasted lamb and questionable puddles. You want to sit down. You want to rest your feet. You want to ponder a selection of dishes in a calm environment. You want a menu. This street, with its glorious, democratic, chaotic food, free for all, is amazing. But it's not what you're here for. You need to find a proper fanguan, a real restaurant. Somewhere in this city of a million kitchens, there must be a quiet table waiting just for you. As you push onward, leaving the fragrant chaos of the food stall alley behind, a fundamental question begins to bubble up in your mind, much like one of those mysterious pots of broth. Why did this happen here, now? Why did the very concept of eating out as a refined, leisurely activity suddenly crystallize in 12th century China? A nobleman in contemporary Europe would have eaten in his own great hall, served by his own staff. A commoner would have eaten at home, whatever his family could produce or afford. The idea of going to a commercial establishment, paying a stranger to cook you a specific meal from a list of options, it would have been utterly alien. The answer, you begin to understand as you observe the rhythm of the city, isn't just about food. It's about a complete social and economic revolution. The Song Dynasty was experiencing an unprecedented period of prosperity and urbanization. You see the evidence everywhere. You walk past a massive, multi-story building that you learn is a warehouse for a silk merchant. The amount of wealth concentrated here is staggering. For the first time in Chinese history, a class of citizens existed that was not tied to the land merchants, artisans, shopkeepers, and a vast bureaucracy of scholar officials. These people didn't have farms to feed them, nor did they necessarily have the large household staff of the old aristocracy. What they did have was disposable income. And because Kaifeng was a political and commercial hub, it was a magnet for people from all over the empire. Think about it. You're a government official recently posted to the capital from a coastal province in the south, like Fujian. You grew up eating fresh seafood, light sauces, and mountains of rice. But here you are, in Kaifeng, the heart of the northern plains. The local cuisine is all about wheat noodles, buns, dumplings and hearty, savoury flavours. Your palate is lonely. You miss the food of home. Suddenly, an entrepreneur sees an opportunity. He opens a restaurant that explicitly caters to southerners, advertising authentic dishes from your region. For you, this isn't just a meal. It's a cure for homesickness. You can reconnect with your identity one bite at a time. This is a mainstream historical fact that completely transformed city life. Kaifeng had dozens, if not hundreds, of these regional restaurants. There were restaurants for people from Sichuan, known for its bold and spicy flavours, restaurants for people from Hebei, and, of course, for the locals who enjoyed the robust northern fare. But it wasn't just about homesick officials. The city was a place of business. A travelling merchant might need to entertain a potential partner. A group of scholars, having just passed their civil service exams, would want to celebrate their success. These social occasions required a neutral, public, yet respectable space. You couldn't just invite a business associate over to your small rented apartment. A proper restaurant, with private rooms and attentive service, became the new public square for the upwardly mobile. It was a place to see and be seen, to network and to display your wealth and sophistication by ordering the most exotic and expensive dishes. Historians still argue about the exact catalyst for this explosion in dining culture, whether it was driven more by the homesickness of regional transplants or the new networking needs of a burgeoning middle class. In reality, it was likely a perfect storm of both. Then there was the sheer practicality of it. Living quarters in a crowded city like Kaifeng were often small. Not everyone had the space or the equipment for elaborate cooking. For the urbanites of the Song Dynasty, eating out was simply more convenient. It saved time, effort, and the risk of burning down your highly flammable wooden house, a problem we touched on with those firefighting watchtowers. Remember how convenient it is to order a pizza after a long day. You are witnessing the birth of that exact sentiment. A quirky detail that highlights this social shift comes from a contemporary text called The Eastern Capital, A Dream of Splendor, Our Best Guide to Life in Kaifeng. It mentions scholars' soup with tidbits, a specific dish marketed to academics. It wasn't just about flavour, it was about identity. You could literally eat your social status. You were what you ate, not just nutritionally, but culturally. This specialisation this idea that a restaurant wouldn't just sell food, but a specific type of food for a specific type of person, was the revolutionary spark. And that spark required a way to communicate these choices to the customer. It required a list. It required a menu. As you finally turn onto a slightly quieter, more elegant looking street, you feel you're getting closer. You're no longer in the world of frantic street food. The buildings here are more ornate, the signs more gracefully painted. This is where you will find what you are looking for. The street you found is decidedly different. The raw, chaotic energy of the market alleys has been replaced by a sense of polished, commercial grace. The buildings are taller, many featuring intricately carved wooden balconies on the upper floors where patrons can be seen enjoying the breeze. Colourful paper lanterns hang under the eaves, gently swaying even in the still air, their soft glow suggesting a world of indoor comforts. This street feels expensive. It's less about shouting vendors and more about discreet, beckoning doorways. You see a silk shop with lustrous bolts of fabric, arranged in a pleasing display, a store selling fine ceramics, and another dealing in delicate handcrafted paper fans. And nestled between them are the fanguan, the real restaurants. You can spot them easily. They are typically larger structures, often marked by a more elaborate facade or a distinctive flag or banner, bearing the establishment's name in bold calligraphy. Unlike the street stalls, they are not open to the elements. Their entrances are proper doorways, some with heavy wooden doors, others with hanging cloth partitions that offer a tantalizing, incomplete glimpse of the world within. This physical barrier is a clear social signal. What happens in here is separate from the life of the street. This is a destination, not an afterthought. You choose one that looks particularly inviting. It's a 2-story building with a dark, lacquered timber frame and elegant latticework screens covering the upper windows. A large, crimson banner with a single, powerful-looking character hangs by the entrance. Not having the faintest idea what it says it could mean, the Jade Pavilion, or danger, sinkhole, you decide to take your chances. You push aside the heavy cloth screen hanging in the doorway and step inside. The change is instantaneous. The noise of the city street vanishes, replaced by a low, civilized hum of conversation and the gentle clinking of porcelain. The air is cool and smells faintly of incense and brewing tea, a clean, calming scent designed to scrub the sensory grime of the city from your palate and mind before you even begin to eat. The interior is spacious and dimly lit. The floor is made of dark, polished wood, and round tables are scattered across the room, each surrounded by a set of sturdy-looking wooden stools. There's no great hall with communal benches here. The emphasis is on small, discrete groups, and you immediately feel out of place. Terribly, horribly out of place. Everyone else seems to know exactly what they're doing. At one table, a group of men who you recognise by their distinctive hats as scholar officials are engaged in quiet, intense conversation over tiny cups of wine. At another, a wealthy-looking merchant and his family, draped in fine silks, are laughing as a server brings a succession of dishes to their table. There's an established etiquette here, a silent language of nods, gestures, and seating arrangements that you are completely illiterate in. It's like walking into a high-stakes poker game without knowing the rules. Historians note that Song-era etiquette manuals were quite explicit about these things: who sits where, who pours the wine, how to properly praise a dish. To your contemporaries, this would be as intuitive as knowing not to put your elbows on the table. To you, it's a social minefield. A young man in a simple but clean blue tunic approaches you. He's a server, a pawan, and he bows slightly, his hands tucked into his sleeves. He rattles off a stream of polite, formulaic-sounding phrases in that same impenetrable Kaifeng dialect. You just stare back, your mind a complete blank. This is a far cry from the street vendor who just pointed at a skewer and grunted. This requires interaction. This requires a vocabulary. The server, seeing your blank tourist expression, a look he has surely seen 1,000 times on merchants from distant lands, gives a patient, almost imperceptible sigh. He gives up on the verbal pleasantries. Instead, he gestures for you to follow him. He doesn't lead you to one of the common tables in the main room. Perhaps he intuits your discomfort and your solitude. Instead, he leads you toward the back, to a small, screened-off area offering a little more privacy. It's a thoughtful gesture, the 12th century equivalent of being seated at a quiet corner table. It's in this small, semi-private space that your eyes finally lock onto it. It's not a piece of paper handed to you. It's something far more grand and permanent. Hanging on the wall, in a place of honour, is a large, vertical wooden board, lacquered a deep, glossy black. And carved into it, in neat, orderly columns, are dozens upon dozens of chalk-white characters. This is it. The menu. No friendly illustrations, no helpful descriptions. Just a silent, imposing list of possibilities. And now you have to choose. You stand before the hanging board, the centerpiece of this quiet, curtained-off alcove. It is beautiful in an intimidating, scholarly way. The lacquered wood is so dark and polished. You can see a faint, distorted reflection of your own face in it. The characters are not sloppily painted on, but are meticulously carved, their grooves filled with a white pigment that makes them leap out from the black background. This is a testament to the permanence of the restaurant's offerings. It's not a daily special board you can just wipe clean. This is the canon. This is the culinary scripture of the house. Your mind struggles to make sense of the elegant, complex symbols. For a literate Song Dynasty local, this board would read as a clear and logical index of flavours. For you, it might as well be abstract art. The characters are arranged in vertical columns, read from top to bottom, right to left. You can see, just from the visual organisation, that it is divided into sections. There's a long column on the far right, then a cluster of several shorter columns, and then another distinct section to the left. You can infer the structure even if you can't read the words. It's like looking at a restaurant menu in a language you don't speak today. You can usually tell where the appetizers end and the main courses begin, just by the layout and pricing. The server, your patient guide, stands by, holding a small wooden stick. He is ready to point and, one assumes, attempt a pantomime-based translation, if necessary. He seems to understand you're not a local official from Sichuan. Looking for the familiar taste of home, you are something else entirely. An illiterate barbarian, probably, but a paying one. You point tentatively at the top of the very first column on the right. The server nods and taps the character with his stick, speaking the name of the dish aloud. It's a series of melodic sounds that mean absolutely nothing to you. But in your mind, thanks to the historical record, we can translate. This section, you now understand, is likely dedicated to the restaurant's specialties, its signature dishes, things with poetic, evocative names that often have little to do with their actual ingredients. You might be pointing at something called Jade Grotto with 100 Flowers, which could be a delicate vegetable stir-fry, or perhaps Phoenix Soaring Through the Crimson Clouds, a rather dramatic name for what is, essentially, a fancy preparation of chicken. This naming convention was a crucial part of the dining experience. It added a layer of literary and artistic appreciation to the meal. You weren't just ordering food, you were ordering a line of poetry. A quirky fringe tidbit is that some of these dish names were inside jokes or literary allusions that only the highly educated scholar class would understand, a kind of culinary gatekeeping. The main challenge for historians is deciphering what these poetic names actually referred to. The famous 12th century text, The Eastern Capital, A Dream of Splendor, provides tantalizing lists of these dishes, but very few recipes. It's like finding a menu from an ancient, legendary restaurant, but with no descriptions of the ingredients. So, when it lists something like fake wild boar, historians are left to argue. Was it a dish made from a cheaper meat, like pork, but prepared to taste like wild boar? Or was it an early form of vegetarian mock meat, perhaps made from tofu or mushrooms? The debate is lively because it touches upon the sophistication of their culinary arts. You gesture again, sweeping your finger down the column, a sign of general inquiry. The server seems to get the idea. He points to another dish, says its name, and then, in a stroke of universal communication, he puffs out his cheeks and waves his hands like fins. Fish. Ah, okay. You're getting somewhere. He points to another character, clucks like a chicken, and flaps his elbows. Got it. This is going to be a slow process, a game of medieval charades. What is absolutely certain, a mainstream fact of the era, is the sheer level of choice on offer. A typical menu in a high-end Kaifeng restaurant would list anywhere from 50 to over 200 distinct dishes. This wasn't a prefix menu where you got what you were given. This was choice, on a scale that was utterly unprecedented anywhere else in the world. It represents a fundamental shift in the relationship between the consumer and the provider. The power to choose has been handed to you, the diner. The restaurant is making a promise. Whatever you desire within the vast vocabulary of our kitchen, we can provide it for you. It is an expression of culinary confidence that borders on swagger. You feel a little thrill of power yourself. Even though you can't read a single character, you understand the system. You are a customer. You have money. You hope. And this board is a universe of options waiting for your command. The server is still watching you patiently, stick in hand. It's time to get specific. You point towards the next block of text, the cluster of shorter columns. You want to know what else is on offer, beyond the poetic house specials. You move your attention from the grand, poetic specials to the next cluster of columns on the black lacquered board. This section appears more workaday, more straightforward. The columns are shorter, the listings more numerous and tightly packed. Your guide, the ever-patient server, taps his wooden stick at the top of this new section, and you can sense this is where the staples, the foundational carbs of the northern Chinese diet, reside. This is the noodle section, and the dumpling section, and the bun section. In short, it's a celebration of wheat in all its glorious forms. For someone from a rice-centric culture, or a European world of coarse bread, the sheer variety here would be dizzying. To a northern Song Dynasty diner, this was the heart of the meal. Your guide points to a character and makes a long slurping sound while mimicking pulling something hand over hand. Noodles. Mian. He then points to another, and another, and another. It dawns on you that there aren't just one or two types of noodles. There are dozens. This isn't like choosing between spaghetti and penne. This is an entire phylum of food. From historical records, we know they had broad, flat noodles, thin, thread-like noodles, noodles cut into diamond shapes, and even knife-cut noodles, which are still famous today, where a chef shaves ribbons of dough directly from a large block into a pot of boiling water with frightening speed and precision. The server can't possibly pantomime all of this. He settles for pointing at one, then making a gesture of pouring a bowl of something over it, and then pointing to another, and making a stir-frying motion with his hands. So, noodles in soup, and fried noodles. That much you can grasp. This restaurant would have offered both tangmian, noodles served in a rich broth, and kaomian, the ancestor of modern chow mein. Historians widely acknowledge that while noodles had existed for centuries, archaeologists found a 4,000-year-old bowl of noodles in China preserved in an overturned pot. It was during the Song Dynasty that they became a sophisticated, universally beloved staple. They weren't just peasant food anymore. They were a canvas for culinary artistry, served in the finest establishments in the capital. The menu board would have differentiated them not just by shape, but by the broths. They came in a rich beef broth, a lighter chicken broth, perhaps a spicy vegetable broth. Beyond noodles, your guide points to another group of characters. He mimes wrapping something up in a small package with his hands and then pinching it closed. Dumplings. Again, the variety would have been staggering. There would be boiled dumplings, jiaozi, steamed dumplings, and pan-fried dumplings, goti, the original pot sticker, so named for its delightful tendency to stick to the wok. The fillings would be listed as well. Pork and cabbage, lamb and leek, maybe even delicate shrimp fillings for the wealthier clientele. You're starting to realise that choosing a single dish here is a task of monumental importance, with endless permutations. And then there are the buns. Remember the simple, fluffy white mantou you saw in the street? In here, they are elevated. The menu would list baked buns with crispy sesame tops, xiaobing, and stuffed buns baozi filled with sweet red bean paste or savoury minced meat. A particularly quirky item that appears in historical accounts is the crystal bun, likely named for its translucent, almost glowing steamed wrapper made from very fine wheat starch, revealing the colourful filling within. It was food designed to be as beautiful as it was delicious. You stare at the carved characters, this lexicon of wheat. It's a bit like a modern-day diner menu with its endless breakfast combinations. You can have your eggs scrambled, fried or poached, with a side of bacon, sausage or ham, and your choice of toast, English muffin or bagel. This menu board represents that same spirit of customizable comfort food. Historians sometimes debate the social significance of this wheat-centric cuisine. Was the South's reliance on rice seen as less sophisticated by the northern-dominated government in Kaifeng? Or was it simply a matter of agricultural reality, a celebration of the crops that grew best on the Yellow River Plain? Either way, for a diner in this restaurant, This section of the menu was a familiar and comforting starting point for any meal. The server, seeing your dazed expression in the face of so many choices, offers a helpful intervention. He points to one specific noodle dish, gives a confident nod and a thumbs-up gestureer sign that seems to have transcended 1,000 years of cultural change. He's recommending the house favourite noodle bowl. It's a safe, popular choice. A lifeline for the indecisive, time-travelling diner. You consider it, but your eyes are drawn to the next section of the board, the one that promises the main events. The world of noodles is fascinating, but you're here for the full experience. You shake your head politely at the noodle suggestion and gesture onward. Let's see the meat. Your gaze slides leftward on the great black board, moving to the columns that are clearly the heart of the menu, the main courses. If the noodle section was about comforting carbs, this section is about status, flavour and the butcher's art. The server understands your intention immediately. He taps his stick next to a prominent character, one of the most common staples in Chinese cuisine, then and now, pork. He simply oinks. It's a surprisingly effective communication tool, but it's not just one listing for pork. Oh no, that would be far too simple. Your guide's stick travels down a list of dishes that celebrate the pig in its entirety. From historical texts, like Recipes from the Kitchen of a Recluse and the Pure Nourishment collection, we know the Song Dynasty chefs were masters of nose-to-tail cooking. This menu would have reflected that. The server points to a dish and mimes something being slow cooked in a pot for a long, long time. This is almost certainly a variation of dongpo pork, a famous dish of braised pork belly, invented by the poet and gourmand Su Shi, also known as Su Dongpo, during this very era. It's a mainstream historical fact that this dish, with its meltingly tender fat and rich, savoury sweet sauce, became a culinary legend. The menu might list it poetically as red braised fragrant meat, but anyone in the know would recognise the beloved classic. He points to another and makes a gesture of thinly slicing something and then quickly tossing it in a pan. A pork stir-fry, likely with bamboo shoots or mushrooms. He points to yet another and puffs out his chest pork ribs, a pricier and more substantial offering. The variety would be stunning. There'd be sweet and sour preparations, a flavour combination that was already well established. There would be dishes heavy on garlic and scallions, and others that relied on the mellow, deep flavour of fermented bean paste. The stick moves on. The server clucks and flaps his elbows. Chicken. Just like with the pork, the listings under the chicken category would be a litany of different preparations. There would be simple, clean-tasting, steamed chicken, served cold with a ginger scallion dipping sauce. There would be rich, hearty chicken stews, and a local specialty known as barrel chicken, where a whole chicken was cooked in a sealed container, resulting in incredibly succulent meat. And, of course, there would be chicken soup, the universal cure-all. Next, the server makes that familiar fishy face again, waving his hands like fins. The fish section would be a point of pride for a top-tier restaurant in Kaifeng. Even though the capital was landlocked, the Grand Canal, that great aquatic highway you travelled on, was a direct artery to the vast river systems and even the coastal regions of China. Fresh fish, packed in ice and rushed to the capital, was a luxury and a clear signal of the restaurant's excellent supply chain. The menu would likely specify the type of fish, with carp from the Yellow River being a common and popular choice. There would be listings for steamed whole fish, a classic preparation designed to showcase the freshness of the ingredient, and for crispy, deep-fried fish served with a tangy sauce. A more unusual and fringe offering you might see on such a menu would be something like drunken shrimp, live shrimp, stunned in strong alcohol, and then quickly cooked or eaten. It was a form of dinner theatre, showcasing ultimate freshness in a way that might make a modern health inspector a little nervous. One thing you might notice by its absence is a large section dedicated to beef. While cattle were present in Song China, They were primarily valued as draft animals for ploughing fields. They were a crucial part of the agricultural engine, and there were even government regulations restricting their slaughter. While beef dishes existed, and some restaurants might offer it, it was far less common and likely more expensive than pork or lamb. Historians still debate the cultural versus economic reasons for pork's dominance, but for a diner in 12th century Kaifeng, pork was undisputed king. You absorb the sheer volume of choices. It's paralyzing. Every option sounds like it could be the best thing you've ever tasted. You realize this menu is not designed for a solo diner. It's designed for a group, for a shared experience. The idea is to order several of these main courses, along with some noodles and vegetables, and place them all in the center of the table for everyone to sample. This communal style of eating encourages conversation and togetherness. You, a lone time traveller, are the anomaly. Ordering just one of these grand dishes for yourself would be a bit like ordering an entire birthday cake and a single fork. It's just not how it's done. This presents a new dilemma. How can you possibly choose just one dish to represent this entire glorious section? The server, ever watchful, sees the conflict on your face and waits, stick poised, ready for your final difficult decision. After grappling with the dizzying array of pork and chicken, your eyes drift to a section of the menu that seems even more cryptic. The characters here are different, more complex, and the server's attempts at pantomime become decidedly more abstract. This is the exotic section, a catch-all category for adventurous palates, vegetarian specialties, and ingredients that were considered novel or luxurious. For a modern diner, this part of the menu is where things get really interesting, and occasionally a little strange. Your guide points to a dish. He makes a flowing gesture with his hands, like ripples in water, and then points to the ground. You haven't a clue what that means. Water dirt? From the historical record, we can infer this could be a number of things. He might be indicating a sophisticated vegetable dish. The Song Dynasty was a golden age for horticulture, and chefs had access to a stunning variety of produce that would have been unknown in Europe at the time. Things like spinach, which had recently been introduced from Persia, tender bamboo shoots, and a whole host of different mushrooms and fungi. The dish might be poetically named Treasures from the Earth, referring to a mix of braised mushrooms and winter melon. This is also where you would find the creative and surprisingly modern-sounding vegetarian options. Buddhism, a major influence during the Song Dynasty, has strong vegetarian traditions, and restaurants catered to observant monks as well as lay people who might eat vegetarian for spiritual or health reasons. But this wasn't just about boiling some cabbage. This was the birthplace of mock meats, or fanguan. A talented chef could use tofu, a food product that was already ancient but perfected during this time, gluten or mushrooms, to mimic the texture and even the flavour of meat. A mainstream historical fact is that Marco Polo was so impressed with the variety of vegetarian options and tofu preparations he encountered in Yuan Dynasty China, the dynasty that followed the Song, that he wrote about them in Nine Haoti, his travels. The dish the server is pointing to could be a vegetarian mock duck, artfully prepared from layers of pressed tofu skin. The server tries another. He makes a squiggly motion with his finger. Snake? Maybe. While not a common staple, more adventurous game meats would be listed in this section. Depending on the restaurant's ambition and connections, you might find venison, wild boar, the real kind this time, or even more unusual fare sourced from the far southern provinces. However, the squiggly finger could also mean eel, a popular delicacy, often braised in a rich, dark sauce. Then you get to the really strange sounding names. Historical menus from the period list dishes that translate to things like quails in a wolf pack or 1,000-layer pig ears. The first one is likely just a poetic name for a dish of several quails, served together. The second is a bit more literal. Pig ears, very thinly sliced and pressed together to form a layered terrine, served cold and prized for its unique, crunchy, chewy texture. It's still a popular appetizer today. A truly fringe dish from this era, one that shows their willingness to experiment with everything, was plums pickled in brine with ginger. This wasn't a sweet dessert. It was a sour, salty, pungent side dish meant to cut through the richness of the main courses and cleanse the palate. To a Western palate used to sweet pickled things, a salty plum would be a surprising jolt. Historians and food scientists still argue about the precise flavour profiles of Song Dynasty cuisine. While we know the ingredients they used, soy sauce, rice vinegar, ginger, scallions, Sichuan peppercorns, star anise and cinnamon, to name a few, we don't know the exact proportions they favoured. Was their sweet and sour pork intensely sweet like the modern takeout version, or was it a much more subtle, tart-forward flavour? Without detailed recipes, we are left to make educated guesses based on clues in poems and diaries. The server points to one more item in this enigmatic section. He pinches his fingers together as if holding something small, and then pops it into his mouth with a look of delight. This could be anything from stir-fried field snails to roasted chestnuts. This section of the menu is a perfect illustration of the Song Dynasty's personality. Sophisticated, curious, worldly, and a little bit weird. It shows a culture that was deeply confident in its culinary traditions, but also eager to explore new ingredients and techniques. It was a food culture that feared nothing. It was this adventurous spirit that pushed them to catalogue and categorise their food in such detail. You have a newfound respect for the complexity of it all. You're starting to feel you understand the grammar of the menu. But a full meal needs more than just a main course and some noodles. You look to the final section of the board, wondering what they offer to round out the meal. Feeling a bit overwhelmed by the sheer gravity of choosing a main course, you let your eyes wander to the last few columns on the lacquered board. This section seems to contain shorter, simpler listings, likely the supporting cast for the stars of the meal, the soups, the desserts, and perhaps the drinks. Your guide, sensing you're ready to move on, obligingly taps his stick near the top of this final section. He cups his hands into a bowl shape and makes a slurping sound, his third or fourth time using this particular pantomime. It's the universal sign for soup. But just like every other category on this menu, soup is a deceptively simple word for a vast and nuanced world. A Song-era restaurant wouldn't just offer chicken soup. The menu would differentiate between a geng, a thick, stew-like soup, often thickened with starch, and a tang, a clear, light, and intensely flavourful broth. A mainstream historical fact is that the Chinese concept of soup was, and is, fundamentally different from the Western one. It wasn't always an appetizer to start a meal, but was often consumed throughout the meal, acting as a soothing, warming beverage and a way to wash down the other dishes. The server points to a specific listing. We can infer from contemporary accounts that this might be a simple egg drop soup, where silken threads of egg are bloomed in a simmering chicken broth. Another might be a sour and peppery soup, a distant ancestor of today's hot and sour soup, designed to whet the appetite and aid digestion. There would also be more substantial soups that could almost be a meal in themselves, perhaps a thick fish head soup, or a hearty pork rib soup with winter melon. This restaurant would have offered a spectrum of soups, from the most delicate, clear consommé to the heartiest, thickest pottage. After the soup category, your guide's stick moves down to what you can only assume are the desserts. This is another area where your 21st century expectations might lead you astray. The line between sweet and savoury was much more blurred, and dessert wasn't necessarily a course served at the very end of the meal. Sweet dishes were often interspersed with savoury ones. Furthermore, the concept of a super sugary baked dessert was not the norm. Sugar was available, but honey was just as common, and the sweetness was generally more subtle. Your guide points to an item, and you see from his expression that this is a popular one. It might be something like honeyed fruit, which could refer to fresh lychees, or melon drizzled with honey, or perhaps cooked pears or crab apples, slow poached in a sweet spiced syrup. Chilled desserts were also a surprising specialty of the era. Wealthy establishments had access to ice, harvested in winter and stored in deep, insulated ice houses. A truly luxurious treat would be a bowl of iced melon or a chilled sweet bean soup on a hot day. This use of ice for culinary, rather than just preservative purposes, was a fringe but fascinating sign of the era's sophistication. Think of it as the 12th century version of artisanal ice cream. The menu might also list things that barely register as dessert to a modern palate. Something like almond tea, a thick, warm and creamy drink made from ground almonds and sweetened with sugar or honey, could be served as a comforting end to a meal. Historians also debate the nature of Song Dynasty pastries. While they had deep-fried, honey-glazed items, the flaky, buttery pastries of European baking were unknown. Their sweets were often based on rice flour, giving them a distinctively soft and sometimes chewy texture, like glutinous rice balls stuffed with sweet sesame paste. Finally, you can't have a meal without something to drink. Below the desserts, there would almost certainly be a listing for cha, tea. But this wasn't a tea bag in a mug. Tea preparation was a refined art form. The server might pantomime whisking, as the popular method during the Song Dynasty was to whisk powdered green tea with hot water in a bowl until a thick, frothy beverage was created a dead ringer for modern Japanese matcha. There would also be wine, or more accurately, fermented rice wine miju. It was typically served warm in small porcelain cups. The menu would likely offer several grades, from common, everyday wine to aged, premium vintages for special occasions. You have now surveyed the entire universe of this restaurant, from noodles to nuts. You have a mental map of the culinary landscape. The problem of choice, however, remains. In fact, it's gotten worse. Now you want soup, and some of that weird salty plum dish, and dongpo pork, and a bowl of iced melon. Ordering for one is not just a faux pas, it's a logistical nightmare. You sigh. The weight of 1,000 years of culinary history is pressing down on your shoulders. You have to decide. After an internal debate that feels as complex and layered as a 1,000-year-old pig-ear terrine, you finally make your decision. There's no way you can sample everything, so you opt for a strategy of representative greatness. You will order one house special, one staple, and a drink. It feels like a balanced, respectable choice for a lone traveller. You point with what you hope is an air of confidence to the phoenix soaring through the crimson clouds, the fancy chicken dish from the specials board. Then you point to a straightforward listing in the noodle section, simple noodles in broth, and finally you gesture to the character for tea, a classic combo. The server, the pawan, seems to approve of your choices. He gives a crisp nod, repeats the order in a flurry of syllables that you don't even try to catch, and bows slightly before gliding away towards a curtained-off doorway you assume leads to the kitchen. You are left alone in your semi-private alcove, with nothing to do but wait and absorb the atmosphere of the fanguan. The ambience is a carefully engineered performance of civilized leisure. The low hum of conversation from the main room provides a pleasant, unobtrusive social buzz. There's no shouting, no raucous laughter, just the gentle murmur of people enjoying food and company. Then you notice the music. You'd heard it faintly from the street, but in here it's clear. From a discreet corner of the main dining room, or perhaps from an unseen balcony, comes the sound of a musician playing a pipa, the pear-shaped lute you saw earlier. The music is not a bombastic performance demanding attention. It's a meandering, atmospheric melody that floats through the restaurant, another layer in the sensory experience, like the scent of incense. This is dinner, and a show, but in the most understated and elegant way imaginable. Your tea arrives first, brought by a different server. It's not in a cup, but in a beautiful celadon glazed bowl. The liquid is a vibrant, creamy green, topped with a thick foam, just as the matcha-like preparation method would suggest. You take a sip. It's strong, grassy, and slightly bitter, completely unsweetened. It's a flavour designed to cleanse the palate and sharpen the senses, a world away from a modern, milky latte. It is intensely, authentically tea. A few moments later, the paralyzed returns, this time with a large wooden tray laden with your meal. He places the dishes on the table with practiced efficiency. The bowl of noodle soup is deceptively simple. A steaming, aromatic chicken broth, perfectly clear, in which floats a nest of pale, delicate noodles. A few glistening greens and slices of mushroom are the only garnish. The phoenix soaring through the crimson clouds is more dramatic. It's a plate of expertly cut chicken pieces, stir-fried in a rich, dark red sauce that clings to every piece. The crimson clouds are likely red peppers or a sauce made from fermented red bean paste. The aroma is complex savoury, slightly sweet, with a hint of ginger and wine. One of the most striking mainstream historical facts about Song-era restaurants was the incredible speed and accuracy of their service. Our guide to the city, the eastern capital, a dream of splendour, marvels at it. A customer would order, even a complex order of 20 different dishes for a large party, and the paralyzed would take the order, often singing it out to the kitchen, and the dishes would appear quickly and in the correct sequence, without a single mistake. This implies a highly organised system behind the scenes. As you begin to eat, another critical innovation of the Song Dynasty comes into play: paying for the meal. You notice the group of merchants at a nearby table getting ready to leave. They don't pull out clanking bags of coins. The head of the party produces a small rectangular piece of paper. This is it, one of the most important inventions in economic history: paper money. First developed by private merchants in Sichuan province and then formally adopted by the Song government, these notes, called jiaozi or huizi, were the world's first true paper currency. They were a response to the booming economy. There was so much trade happening that the country was literally running out of copper to mint enough coins. Using paper was lighter, more convenient, and a sign of a highly sophisticated, trust-based economy. Seeing it used so casually here, to pay for a simple dinner, is like watching someone use a credit card for the very first time. You savour your meal, the simple comfort of the noodle soup, and the rich complexity of the chicken. The flavours are new and yet somehow familiar. This is the ancestor of so much of the Chinese food you've known. As you eat, a fringe but charming detail. You might notice the other diners using not just chopsticks for solid food, but elegant, long-handled porcelain spoons for their soups and broths. The pairing of chopsticks and a spoon was the standard, complete toolkit for the refined diner. You, with only your chopsticks, do your best not to splash broth all over your face. You feel a deep sense of connection, a shared moment of humanity across 1,000 years. This simple act of sitting at a table, enjoying a well-cooked meal, is truly timeless. But what you can't see, behind that curtained doorway, is the engine room that makes all this possible. The kitchen? While you quietly enjoy your soaring phoenix chicken, your mind inevitably wanders to the place where the magic is happening. What sort of culinary pandemonium must be unfolding behind that simple cloth curtain separating the dining room from the kitchen? You imagine a single, sweating, all-powerful chef juggling a dozen woks over a roaring fire, screaming orders at a team of terrified apprentices. The reality, as pieced together by historians from city records and guild ledgers, was both more mundane and far more revolutionary. It wasn't chaos, it was a factory assembly line. Let's take a gentle, invisible peek behind that curtain. The first thing that would surprise you is the size. The kitchen of a major Kaifeng fanguan was not a small, cramped room. It was a large, sprawling complex. likely with a high ceiling to allow heat and smoke to escape, and multiple specialised stations. The second thing you'd notice is the division of labour. This wasn't a one-chef-does-it-all situation. The Song Dynasty restaurant kitchen was a marvel of specialisation, a system that would have been familiar to Henry Ford. At the top of the hierarchy was the head chef, or the master of the Red Cauldron. He was less a line cook and more a manager and quality control expert. He would oversee the entire operation, but might only cook the most important or expensive dishes himself. Below him was a highly organised team. There would be a wok master, a specialist who did nothing but stir-frying, a physically demanding job that required immense skill to control the intense heat of the wok, known as wok hei. There would be a separate steamer master, who managed the towering stacks of bamboo baskets, ensuring buns were fluffy and fish was perfectly timed. There would be a soup master, responsible for the long simmering broths that were the foundation of so many dishes. And the specialisation went even deeper. There was the cutting master, or chiagong, whose sole job was to prepare the ingredients. This was a highly respected skill. A good chiagong could slice meat, paper-thin, julienne vegetables into threads as fine as hair, and perform intricate decorative cuts, all with lightning speed and precision, using a single, heavy-faced cleaver. The consistency of the cuts wasn't just for show. It ensured that every piece of food in a stir-fry would cook evenly in the flash of heat from the wok. A mainstream historical fact is that the skill of the cutter was considered just as important as the skill of the cook. Then you'd have the seasoning master, who portioned out the sauces and spices for each dish, ensuring absolute consistency. If you and someone across the room both ordered the phoenix soaring through the crimson clouds, the seasoning master ensured both plates tasted identical. This level of standardization was key to building a restaurant's reputation. Finally, you had the ranks of junior assistants, the apprentices and dishwashers, the water carriers and fire stokers who kept the whole machine running. This system is what allowed for the incredible speed and accuracy of service. The pawan, your server, would call out an order not to a single chef, but to the entire kitchen. The order would be a kind of code. When he sang out, "Phoenix soaring!" the cutting master would already have the chicken sliced, the seasoning master would grab the premixed sauce, and the wok master would fire up his station, ready to assemble the final product in minutes. A quirky but illuminating tidbit from historical text describes how some of the most specialised and lucrative roles were in niche preparations. For example, a restaurant famous for its preserved duck eggs or pickled vegetables might employ a master preserver who did nothing else, their secret brine recipes a closely guarded trade secret. This system turned cooks into specialised artisans. It's a level of organisation you wouldn't see in European kitchens for another 500 years, with the rise of the French brigade system under Escoffier. The Chinese had perfected the professional kitchen in the 12th century. Historians still debate the origins of this hyper-specialised system. Was it an organic development born of necessity in the busy capital? Or was it modelled on the bureaucratic organisation of the Song government itself, with its clear hierarchies and division of responsibilities? Perhaps it was a bit of both. The kitchen was a microcosm of the orderly, efficient, and complex society it served. As you sit in the tranquil dining room, you have a new appreciation for the frantic, perfectly synchronised ballet happening just a few feet away. Every delicious bite of your chicken, every perfectly textured noodle is the product not of a single artist, but of a well-oiled, invisible machine. You take another sip of your grassy, bitter tea, a perfect counterpoint to the rich flavours of the meal, feeling grateful for the silent, efficient army in the kitchen. As you near the end of your meal, feeling satisfyingly full and culturally enriched. The final, slightly awkward matter of payment looms. You saw the merchant use his futuristic-looking paper money, but as a traveller from a distant, primitive lander, at least, from a different millennium, you are not so sophisticated. Your purse contains the currency of the common person, coins. Specifically, strings of copper coins. You flag down your server, the fanguan, and make a gesture of rubbing your fingers together, the age-old sign for "the bill, please." He nods, and returns a moment later, not with a paper slip, but with a verbal declaration of the total. He says a number that, of course, you don't understand. But you can hear the word "when," the basic unit of currency. Now comes the hard part. He holds out his hand, and you reach into your pouch. Your fingers close around a thick, heavy rope of coins. This is how most everyday transactions were handled. The Song Dynasty minted vast quantities of small round copper coins, each with a distinctive square hole in the middle. This hole was crucial, as it allowed people to thread the coins onto strings, usually in groups of 100 or 10, creating a unit called a guan or a chuan. This system of strings of cash is a mainstream historical fact that defined the Song economy for the average person. Paper money, the jiaozi, was a brilliant innovation, but in the beginning it was typically issued in large denominations, making it more practical for big wholesale transactions than for paying for a bowl of noodles. For a meal like yours, coins were still the norm. You pull out a string, it's surprisingly heavy and clumsy. This is why merchants so eagerly adopted paper money. Carrying a large amount of wealth in coins was a physically demanding task. Imagine having to haul a £10 sack of metal just to do your weekly shopping. You try to count out the correct number of coins, but the process is cumbersome. The fanguan watches you, probably with a mixture of pity and impatience. Finally, he takes the string from you, his fingers flying across the coins with practiced speed, counting them out in a fraction of the time it would have taken you. He isolates the amount required for your meal, plus a little extra, which he hands back. You have no idea if you've been short-changed, but the honesty of service staff was a point of professional pride, so you choose to trust him. There's no formal concept of tipping as we know it today, but good service might be rewarded by simply telling the server to keep the change from a string of coins. As you handle the small, earth-toned metal discs, you can appreciate them as artifacts. They are tangible links to this moment. Each coin would be stamped with the reign name of the emperor under whom it was minted. An economic historian could probably tell you a great deal about trade deficits and copper prices just by looking at the coins in your hand. But what about the actual cost? How much are you paying in terms today? This is a notoriously difficult question for historians to answer. Direct conversions are almost meaningless because the value of goods and labour were completely different. However, we can get a rough idea. A scholar from the period wrote that a family of 5 could live a simple, basic life in the capital for about 20 wen a day. A common soldier might earn around 500 wen a month. Your meal, at a high-end restaurant like this one, probably costs somewhere between 100 and 200 wen. This means your dinero, nice but not extravagant meal, for one cost several days' worth of basic subsistence for an entire family. It was an affordable luxury for a mid-level official or a successful merchant, but a massive expense for a common labourer. It places you, the time-travelling tourist, squarely in the comfortable middle class of Song society. A quirky detail that fascinates economists is the massive outflow of these copper coins. They were so well made and trusted that they became a de facto international currency across East and Southeast Asia. Archaeologists have found huge hoards of Song Dynasty coins in places like Japan, Vietnam, and even on the coast of Africa. The coins in your hand are, quite literally, world famous. Historians continue to debate the long-term effects of the Song's monetary policies, particularly the inflationary pressures caused by the introduction of paper money alongside the massive minting of copper coins. It was a complex, dynamic, and unstable system that foreshadowed many of the economic challenges modern governments face. But for you, the transaction is complete. You have successfully navigated the food, the etiquette, and the currency. You have paid for your little slice of history. With a final nod to the server, you push aside the cloth partition at the entrance and step back out into the street. The sun has begun to set, and the city is transforming itself once again. Stepping out of the calm, ordered world of the fanguan is like plunging back into a rushing river. The sun is sinking below the high, curved roofs of the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and violet. But the fading light doesn't mean the city is going to sleep. On the contrary, Kaifeng is just getting its second wind. The main streets are now filled with people returning home from work, but the smaller alleys and open squares are beginning to transform into something new and magical: the night markets. The abolition of the old Tang Dynasty curfews was one of the most significant social changes of the Song era, and the night market was its most glorious expression. This wasn't just a few brave vendors staying open late. It was a parallel universe of commerce and entertainment that erupted as soon as dusk fell. The air, which earlier was a chaotic mix of 1,000 smells, has now sharpened its focus. The dominant aromas are of frying, grilling, and sweet, sticky glazes caramelizing over hot coals. The city is illuminated by the soft, warm glow of countless paper lanterns hung from storefronts and stalls, and the flickering, dancing light of oil lamps and cooking fires. You decide to take a stroll, allowing the river of people to carry you along. The gentle music of the pippa from the restaurant is now drowned out by a more boisterous and eclectic soundtrack. You hear the sharp, percussive clack, clack, clack of a storyteller's wooden blocks, used to draw a crowd and punctuate his dramatic tales. You hear the high-pitched squeal of a Chinese flute from a makeshift street opera. You hear vendors shouting their wares with a rhythmic, sing-song cadence that has been perfected over generations. It's a festival, and it happens every single night. The food scene in the night market is a completely different beast from the one you just experienced. The refined, poetic dishes of the restaurant are gone, replaced by food that is cheap, fast, and intensely flavourful. This is the food of the people. You see vendors selling skewers of every imaginable kind: glistening, caramelized chunks of lamb, crispy, skinned chicken wings, and even skewers of tiny sparrows, grilled whole. A mainstream historical fact is that these night markets were incredibly diverse, with some records listing over 50 different types of small eats or xiaoqi available. You pass a stall with massive, bubbling woks of oil, where a cook is expertly deep-frying twisted crullers of dough, the ancestor of the modern youtiao. The smell is intoxicatingly fatty and delicious. Another stall is dedicated entirely to sweet soups and desserts for the late-night crowd. You see people huddled around small bowls of warm red bean soup, or chilled sweet tofu pudding, or munching on sugar-frosted fruits on a stick, the original candy apple. A quirky and rather specific delicacy mentioned in historical accounts is ants climbing a tree, a dish of cellophane noodles with flecks of ground pork clinging to them. It's a visually descriptive name for a dish that was a beloved, savoury and cheap staple of the night market goer. But the night market wasn't just about food. It was the epicentre of popular entertainment. You see a small crowd gathered around a shadow puppet theatre, a thin white screen backlit by a lamp, where intricately cut leather figures act out famous legends and myths. A little further on, an acrobat is balancing a frighteningly large stack of porcelain bowls on his head. There are fortune tellers, palm readers, and even street dentists, though getting a tooth pulled under a flickering lantern is probably an experience best left to the historical imagination. Historians are still piecing together the full scope of these entertainments, debating whether they were simply casual distractions or served a deeper social function of disseminating news, morals, and cultural norms to the largely illiterate populace. This world is more democratic than the restaurant. Here, a high-ranking scholar official might be rubbing shoulders with a humble, stable hand, both enjoying a skewer of grilled lamb. The rigid social hierarchies seem to soften and blur in the flickering lantern light. The night market was the great equalizer, a place where everyone, for the price of a few copper coins, could partake in the city's pleasures. It was the beating heart of Kaifeng's public life. As you wander through this magical, chaotic and incredibly vibrant scene, you realise your dinner at the fanguan was only half the story. The restaurant represented the city's ambition, its sophistication, and its rising middle class. The night market represents its soul, its energy, and the insatiable democratic appetite of the million people who called this amazing place home. As you meander through the glowing festive labyrinth of the night market, your stomach full and your senses buzzing, you start to connect the dots. The experiences of the day, the Grand Canal, the towering walls, the chaotic street stalls, the elegant restaurant, and this vibrant night market begin to coalesce into a single, overwhelming thought. How did all of this become possible? What were the historical tectonic plates that shifted to create this uniquely sophisticated food culture? It wasn't an accident. It was the result of a perfect storm of agricultural, technological, and political forces. You think back to the fields you saw from your barge on the way to the city. The foundation of any great civilization is its ability to feed itself, and the Song Dynasty was a powerhouse of agricultural innovation. A mainstream historical fact is the introduction of new, fast-ripening strains of champa rice from Southeast Asia. This remarkable grain could be harvested in as little as 60 days, allowing many southern regions to grow 2, or sometimes even 3, crops a year on the same plot of land. This created massive food surpluses, and all that extra rice flowed north to the capital via the Grand Canal, ensuring the city's granaries were always full. This agricultural abundance was the bedrock upon which everything else was built. But it wasn't just rice. As you saw in the exotic section of the menu, there was a quiet revolution happening in horticulture. The Song era saw the publication of numerous agricultural treatises and encyclopedias, carefully detailing methods for crop rotation, fertilization. They were big on night soil, a topic we probably don't need to explore right before bed, and irrigation. Wealthy scholar officials even competed to cultivate rare flowers and exotic fruits in their private gardens. This explosion in agricultural science meant that the chefs in Kaifeng had a palette of ingredients from spinach to watermelons that was vastly more diverse than anything available to their counterparts in Europe. Then there was the technological side. The most critical technology, you realise, was the one that powered almost every kitchen you've seen today: the widespread use of coal. In a city the size of Kaifeng, firewood would have been impossibly scarce and expensive. The deforestation around the city would have been catastrophic. The Song Chinese were the first civilization to harness coal on an industrial scale, using it not only for their famous iron industry but also for domestic heating and, crucially, for cooking. This provided a cheap, powerful, and consistent source of high heat, which made the rapid cooking styles of stir-frying and deep-frying practical on a mass scale. The smoky, gamey scent of a street-side grill and the intense sizzle of a restaurant's wok were both fueled by this ancient black stone. That slight, sulphurous taste in the air wasn't just pollution, it was the taste of an energy revolution. A quirkier but equally important technology was the simple wheelbarrow. While not a Song invention, they perfected it and used it everywhere. It was the pickup truck of the 12th century. Imagine the logistics of supplying hundreds of restaurants and thousands of food stalls every single day. Armies of labourers with wheelbarrows would trundle through the city's gates at dawn, carrying fresh produce from the suburbs, live chickens in wicker cages, and giant jars of pickles and sauces, ensuring the urban culinary machine never ran out of fuel. Finally, none of this would have happened without the unique political and social climate of the Song dynasty. The government, run by a meritocracy of scholar officials chosen through grueling civil service exams, was largely pragmatic and commercially minded. They understood that trade and a thriving merchant class generated wealth and tax revenue. So they abolished the old curfews, maintained the infrastructure like the Grand Canal, and instituted a stable currency, even if the paper part was a bit volatile. Historians still debate the degree of the Song government's laissez-faire attitude towards the economy, but compared to the rigid, state-controlled systems of earlier dynasties, it was a breath of fresh, commercial air. This pro-commerce environment allowed an entrepreneurial spirit to flourish, letting 1,000 restaurants bloom. You look around at the laughing, eating, celebrating crowds in the night market. This wasn't a world of feudal peasants tied to the land, fearing their lords. This was an urban, commercial, and surprisingly modern society. The restaurant menu wasn't just a list of food. It was a symptom of this entire complex system. It was a symbol of surplus food, of new technology, of social mobility, and of a government that saw commerce not as a threat, but as an engine of prosperity. You, the weary time traveller, have stumbled into one of history's great golden ages, a place where, for a time, the highest art forms included not just poetry and painting, but a perfect bowl of noodles. The energy of the night market, once exhilarating, now begins to feel overwhelming. The initial thrill of discovery is slowly being replaced by a deep-seated weariness that even the finest tea can't dispel. You are an anachronism here, a visitor with no real place in this vibrant, self-contained world. The laughing faces in the lantern light are friendly but foreign. The shouted jokes of the street performers are lost on you. It is time to go. You turn your back on the river of people and the 1,000 twinkling lights and begin the long walk back towards the water gates, the same ones you entered through what feels like a lifetime ago. You navigate by a kind of reverse sensory perception, walking away from the noise and towards the relative quiet, away from the dense aromas of cooking and towards the clean, damp smell of the river. As you move into the quieter residential quarters of the city, the streets become darker and narrower. The festive clamour of the market fades to a distant, muffled hum. Here, the only sounds are the occasional bark of a dog behind a wooden gate, the soft rustle of leaves in a hidden courtyard, and the rhythmic tap-tap-tap of the night watchman's wooden clapper, a lonely sound that marks the passing hours. You reach the imposing structure of the gatehouse, a dark silhouette against a sky now full of stars, undimmed by the electric glow of a future world. The guards, leaning on their halberds, look at you with bored indifference. You are just one more shadow moving through the city in the dead of night. Stepping through the massive archway of the gate feels like crossing a threshold back into another reality. The managed, man-made world of Kaifeng is behind you, and the wilder, more natural world of the river is before you. You find your barge moored at the same stone quay. The boatman is asleep, curled up under a blanket on the deck. The rhythmic lapping of water against the hull is now the loudest sound you can hear. You step back aboard, the gentle rocking of the vessel, a familiar, comforting motion. From here, on the water, the city once again becomes an abstract concept. It's a vast, dark shape on the land, speckled with 1,000 pinpricks of light from the still raging night markets, its constant hum now just a faint whisper on the breeze. A mainstream historical fact that hangs over this entire glorious experience is its impermanence. Within a few short decades of your visit, this magnificent city of Kaifeng would fall. In 1127, the armies of the Jurchen-led Jin dynasty would sweep down from the north, besiege the city, and conquer the northern Song Empire. Kaifeng would be sacked, its population scattered, and the emperor captured. The Song court would flee south, establishing a new capital and continuing as the southern Song. But the golden age of Kaifeng, the city you just experienced, would be over. The dream of splendour would end. This knowledge lends a profound, melancholic beauty to your memories of the day. You weren't just visiting a place, you were visiting a moment, a fragile, fleeting peak of civilization. Historians argue about whether the Jurchen invasion was the sole cause of the decline, or if internal economic strains, like the inflation from printing too much paper money, were already weakening the empire from within. But, whatever the reason, the intricate, joyous world of the Kaifeng fanguan and the sprawling night markets was irrevocably broken. You lie down on your simple pallet on the boat, looking back at the fading lights of the city. You think of the server and his patient pantomimes, the organised chaos of the kitchen, the dizzying choices on that black lacquered board. It was a world built on confidence, on abundance, and on the simple, radical idea that a stranger could and should be able to walk into an establishment and order exactly what their heart and stomach desired. It was the invention of a particular kind of freedom. The gentle rocking of the boat and the soft sounds of the river are a perfect lullaby. The memory of the phoenix soaring through the crimson clouds is a warm and pleasant weight in your stomach. As your barge master stirs and begins to silently pole the boat away from the dock, back towards the Great Canal, and away from the ghost of a golden age, you close your eyes. Your culinary journey is over. The endless menu of choices fades away, replaced by the simple, singular invitation of sleep. And as the city of Kaifeng slowly recedes into the mists of history, you can allow the gentle motion of the water to carry you just as gently into your own deep and peaceful dreams. The lingering echoes of the bustling streets, the distant melodies of the peeper, and the faint, savoury scent of 1,000 cooking fires begin to soften and blur, becoming less a distinct memory, and more a part of the warm, comfortable darkness that now surrounds you. There are no more decisions to be made, no more coins to count, no more mysterious characters to decipher. Your work for the day is done. You have travelled 1,000 years, eaten a magnificent meal, and learned the secrets of a city that truly perfected the art of living. And now, all that is left is to rest, to drift, to let the current of sleep guide you through the long, quiet night. The story is over, the city is far behind, and a deep, restorative calm can finally settle over you, as peaceful and as endless as the silent, star-dusted water.